Could you imagine if the president was incapacitated and instead of replacing him, electing a new president, the cabinet just decides to forge his signature over and over again? You can't make this stuff up, folks. I'm Ron Chapman, the host of Off Air, and tonight we're digging into the criminal implications of the Biden White House's use of the Autopen and what looks like a coordinated effort to hide the commander-in-chief's cognitive decline. I'm going to name names, lay out a tight timeline, explain why Autopen clemency is a legal tripwire for the Biden administration, and compare it fairly to how the DOJ charged Donald Trump over 2020 election conduct. Quite hypocritical. Then I'll tell you who could actually face charges and what Congress is likely to do next. Buckle up. Let's go for a ride into the legal implications of the Biden Autopen. First, if you haven't already subscribed, please go down there and click subscribe, like this video, and leave me a comment to let me know what you think about it. Here's the timeline that we need to start with. In 2024 and January 2025, the Biden White House ran large batches of clemency paperwork, pardons, and commutations through the West Wing. Some were controversial and reportedly included relief for politically sensitive defendants and allies. Reporting and internal emails later showed staff plan to use the Autopen, a device that reproduces a signature to execute the president's name on stacks of warrants. Stacks of warrants. Biden then publicly defended the process, telling the New York Times he made every decision. Well, then why the Autopen? While admitting he did not individually examine every case in big batches. That sounds like some Joe Biden logic, doesn't it? Meanwhile, his team argued the Autopen was standard practice in the White House. But the central question isn't the use of the machine. It's who exercised the pardon power that is supposed to be reserved for the President of the United States. Think about the potential abuses. Friends get pardons. People who contribute to staffers get pardons. Political favors net you pardons. Pay-for-play schemes could run amok without Joe Biden properly executing his authority. I've defended people who've been accused of using the authority of another person, even with their authorization on prescription pads and other devices. Can the president do the same thing? Is this excusable? What's the Department of Justice going to do? On June 2nd, 2025, Reuters reported that the Justice Department opened a probe into whether Biden aides used the Autopen to take official actions without lawful authority. Days later, President Trump, now back in the Oval Office, issued a memorandum ordering a whole of government review of Autopen usage for official acts. Doesn't sound like Donald Trump wants that to be a standard practice. Those two steps turn this from a political spat into criminal exposure for the former White House staff. Congress moved in parallel. House Oversight Chair James Comer sent letters on June 27th compelling testimony from former Press Secretary Jean-Pierre, former Chief of Staff Jeff Zients, and comms aide Ian Sams and Andrew Bates. Subpoenas followed for Biden physician Dr. Kevin O'Connor and Joe Biden's Chief of Staff, Anthony Bernalafer. They balked at voluntary interviews. The committee also sought appearances from Ron Klain, Steve Ricchetti, Bruce Reed, and Anita Dunn, according to the Washington Post. These are high-level staffers, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't recognize them. Some of the highest people in the White House at the time. Then came the Fifth Amendment. On July 9th, Dr. O'Connor arrived for a closed-door deposition and invoked the Fifth to virtually every question. Joe Biden's physician invoked the Fifth. The Fifth is invoked when you believe the potential response will give you criminal exposure. Sure, it's the right of every American, but it's also the right of every American to infer that because this doctor invoked the Fifth, they are protecting some criminal liability. His lawyer said he had no choice, citing both doctor-patient obligations, and this is key, the DOJ's ongoing Autopen investigation. Comer blasted the move. It's clear there was a conspiracy to cover up President Biden's cognitive decline, he said at committee. Clear there's a conspiracy from a member of Congress saying to the White House physician's lawyer. Democrats countered. They said the probe was a partisan sideshow. I wonder if they countered writing a message using an Autopen. That same AP report quoted ranking member Robert Garcia calling the GOP inquiry a waste of time. Certainly, they love to move in an expedient fashion, and I imagine that's one of the reasons the Autopen existed in the first place. 2 days later, on July 16th, Anthony Bernal, Joe Biden's powerful aide, took the fifth to every single question. Jill Biden's aide took the fifth to every question, including whether any unelected official or family member executed presidential duties or whether Biden ever instructed staff to mislead the public about his health. Oversight released the video. On July 18th, former Deputy Chief Ann Tomaschini did the same, invoking the fifth repeatedly in a recorded deposition that Oversight posted hours later. Even ABC News headlined the pattern as the third Biden confidant to refuse to answer questions under the fifth. You might not have heard this story trickling up through the media that much, but let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is the most impactful story related to the Joe Biden White House right now. You have high-level staffers, people close to Joe and Jill Biden, taking the fifth everywhere. So what exactly did the White House physician testify to? Nothing of substance, because he didn't. He pled the fifth on every question. Legally, witnesses can invoke the fifth to avoid self-incrimination, and O'Connor used that right. The fact that he cited an active DOJ investigation tells you that prosecutors are looking at conduct where medical statements, capacity assessments, and internal communications could be evidence. What does that tell you, ladies and gentlemen? That it is very possible that this physician made misleading statements to the public about Joe Biden's cognitive decline. Why is that important? How many primaries did the Democrats have during the last election? None. Why didn't they do it? Because of verification that Joe Biden was in fit for duty shape to perform his duties in the office of the presidency and potentially run for another term. Why is an Autopen clemency on a warrant a legal problem? Let me explain. A pardon is a president's personal Article II power, recognized by the Supreme Court since Ex parte Garland and Schick v. Reed. It cannot be delegated. The Supreme Court says clemency power cannot be delegated. Staff can recommend and process, but the grant must be the president's decision because it is a powerful decision. By contrast, the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel once approved Autopen for signing enrolled bills, a different constitutional clause, when the president explicitly authorizes it. And usually that would be explicit in some sort of document with their actual signature. There is no Office of Legal Counsel blessing for Autopen. And for those who don't know, the Office of Legal Counsel is the office that makes legal decisions and recommendations for the president of the United States. And oftentimes the papers that they write are relied on by the president when there's an issue such as this. There was no Office of Legal Counsel memorandum authorizing the use of the Autopen. If staff used the Autopen without the president's personal authorization, especially if he was incapacitated or unaware, that's not a quirky paperwork issue. It's potentially forgery of a public writing and a false official writing, many counts of it, plus conspiracy if done by agreement. Think 18 U.S.C. 494, 1018, false official certificates, 1001, false statements, and 371, conspiracy to defraud the United States. If people took money or if there were favors handed out for pardons, things get a little deeper. You could end up with wire fraud, obstruction of justice, most of the corruption charges that exist in federal statutes. Key elements turn on intent and authorization. There was no authorization, and intent could only be to use the Autopen to forge. Seems pretty open and shut to me. If the president personally authorized each grant, even via a directed Autopen, it could be valid. But remember, Biden already conceded that that wasn't the case, leading to almost immediate criminal vulnerability. I wouldn't want to be in the crosshairs of this investigation. Let me make this a little bit more plain for the people in the back. Maybe those people in the comments section who may disagree with this characterization of the use of the Autopen. Using an Autopen for a bill has an Office of Legal Counsel memo. It has been authorized. Using it for a pardon does not. The lawyers that are on duty ready to advise the president were not even asked about this power. Why? Because the Office of Legal Counsel would have said no. What does that tell you about the legal defensibility of the use of this Autopen? It's going to be tough. Pardons are non-delegable. The president can't delegate the act of pardoning somebody. If you're a staffer who signed a clemency warrant with an Autopen and you can't show the president made the decision himself, you are standing on quicksand in the crosshairs of an investigation. And when you're standing on quicksand, you're going to reach out for a life raft. And that life raft will be cooperation with the DOJ on the overall competency of President Biden. The act might still be effective if the president truly authorized it, a point even some fact checks concede. But the paper trail and the truthfulness of what you told the public matter for criminal law. And here's the impact of all of this. It is very possible that some of these pardons are not actually legal, which means those convictions should still be in effect. Joe Biden's pardons that he did not personally authorize may very well be reversed by Donald Trump's Department of Justice. How many political enemies are unsafe from a reversal of their pardon decision? This is going to get very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. What are the implications of staffers pleading the fifth here? How do we get around this? Pleading the fifth is lawful and not evidence of guilt technically, but it signals criminal exposure is on their counsel's mind and the individual's mind. It's a pretty good clue that they're aware of something. In Congress, committees can either keep building a record with cooperative witnesses, pursue contempt referrals for defiances of subpoena, or take the nuclear option. They can give a witness immunity under 18 U.S.C. 6002 and 6005 to compel the testimony. That testimony then can't be used against the witness criminally. If the White House believes that O'Connor, Tomasini, and others are central to this DOJ investigation, they may consider the immunity route for several of them who are likely to provide some sort of statement. That's likely happening behind closed doors right now. People are providing testimony pursuant to limited immunity grants after they have pled the fifth. Where's the White House going next? Oversight has already noticed or requested interviews with many of the aides and communication staff. The Washington Post reported calendar slots late in July and early August and quoted Comer saying aides were refusing to answer basic questions, while Rep. Byron Donalds, called the pattern stunning. Expect more depositions, more public hearings, and a final report with a referral to the Department of Justice once the witness log is done. Is the DOJ actually investigating? Yes, they are. They'll get the referral from Congress, but they're currently doing an investigation right now. Reuters reported the DOJ's review in June, so they've been at it for a couple of months already. The Associated Press later tied O'Connor's Fifth Amendment invocation to that same probe. Trump's June directive ordered the executive branch to audit Autopen practices. So you've got congressional and criminal tracks running in parallel here, which is exactly when lawyers start to lock down their clients and have them plead the fifth. What did members of Congress in this case actually say on the record related to the use of the Autopen? Well, Comer said it's clear that there was a conspiracy. Donald said they're now hiding behind the Constitution so that they don't have to tell the truth. That's corruption at the highest level. Ranking member Robert Garcia said could be working to lower costs. Instead, they're obsessed with the past. Apparently, seeking justice is an obsession with the past. Now, the inevitable comparison. Trump's obstruction case. Recall, Democrats made a big issue out of alleged obstruction by Donald Trump and everybody involved in January 6th. They argued that his speech was obstruction of justice because it was intended to prevent a vote going on and a peaceful handover of the White House. Of course, that case isn't going anywhere anymore, but the theory behind that is that you are obstructing justice by your speech. The 2023 federal indictment alleged that he knowingly used false claims to obstruct the certification of the 2020 election. This theory was later narrowed by the Supreme Court in the Fisher decision, which require impairing evidence or similar acts. In short, the DOJ said that lies became illegal when weaponized to obstruct a governmental function. Well, this gets interesting. If prosecutors now conclude that Biden aides fabricated official writings, forged signatures, lied to federal bodies to keep the machinery of clemency and executive orders moving, that is, to usurp the president's non-delegable power, then the same structural logic of obstruction and fraud applies, only this time there are writings and documents and obstructive conduct and lies. Different facts, same legal backbone, intent, falsity, corruption of process, there can be potential charges. I just did a video regarding Letitia James and found it quite odd that she was falsifying mortgage documents while claiming that Donald Trump was falsifying mortgage documents, only this time she's guilty. The hypocrisy is shouting out loud here. Here's the irony you're waiting for. If anyone in the Biden orbit gets charged for official act conduct tied to clemency, they're likely to cite Trump v. United States, the same court's 2024 immunity ruling, arguing those were official acts cloaked by at least presumptive immunity. So yes, the Biden team may try to stand on Donald Trump's immunity to fend off charges about Biden-era decisions. Only in Washington, ladies and gentlemen. And I really want to hear Justice Jackson on this issue when she tries to stand on this immunity for her friends, but she didn't want to do the same thing for Donald Trump. That's the level set law. So we're sober now. Pardons, that's the president's power. Staff can't grant them. Ex parte Garland, Schick v. Reed. The act's validity turns on the president's intent and authorization, not just the handwriting. If the president truly authorized it, the pardon likely stands even if the optics are awful. If he didn't authorize it, the paper may be a false government writing, and those who processed it faced criminal exposure. What happens next? Expect oversight to keep rolling depositions. If the pattern holds, they could seek immunity orders to compel testimony. 2/3 of a committee vote is required, or move towards contempt for noncompliance. Meanwhile, the DOJ's probe keeps the temperature high. When Congress and DOJ run in parallel, staff lawyers usually advise silence, hence all of the Fifth Amendment pleas. And when witnesses go quiet, paper speaks a bit louder. Emails, sign-off sheets, OPA routing logs, the staff secretary clearance packets, and metadata on who pressed go on Autopen sessions. That document trail will decide this case in absence of witness testimony. The bottom line, Biden would have had to have personally authorized each clemency grant, which would gut the need for the Autopen, in order for people to avoid criminal charges. If staff ran clemency through the Autopen without his authorization, they will face charges and can face jail time. This is very serious business, ladies and gentlemen. We don't get to forge the president's signature just because we need to get things done. We need to address whether or not the president has competency. If you value this kind of legally grounded, no-nonsense analysis from the pragmatic side of things, like this video, subscribe to Off Air, drop a comment with your questions. I read every single one of them. Share this with a friend who thinks the Autopen is a nothing burger, and then talk about it. This certainly isn't a nothing burger, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be one of the biggest stories this year, and I'm going to continue to cover it over and over again. Thank you so much for subscribing. I'm Ron Chapman, federal criminal defense attorney and trial lawyer, and this is Off Air. Thank you for joining me.